So there is a brand new poll from the New York Times, a national poll, which shows Kamala Harris with a 4-point lead over Donald Trump. But here's the thing. Thanks to the founding fathers, it's not a national election. It's a collection of state elections. CNN senior data reporter Harry Enten is with us this morning. That's why these swing states are so important, not the national polling. What is the latest on where the swing states stand?
Yeah, I don't really give a hoot about the national polling. It could tell us about trends, but not much more. Look, these are the battleground states, right? These are the 7 we've been looking at. We got 4 weeks to go until the election. Look, the Great Lake battleground states, as close as they've been. Harris by a point in Pennsylvania, 2 in Michigan, 2 in Wisconsin. Way too close to call. You come over to the right side of the screen with me. Sunbelt battleground states. You see more red on this side of the screen than blue. We do see Harris up by a point in Nevada. Again, way too close to call. Trump by a point in North Carolina, Georgia, 2 in Arizona. This has been the consistent story since Kamala Harris got into the race, right? That is that she has done better in those Great Lake battleground states. She has closed the gap in the Sunbelt battleground states, but still friendlier terrain for Trump than those Great Lake battleground states.
How confident should anyone on earth feel that these numbers would actually stick?
Okay, so I consistently say this race is too close to call. So I decided to go back through history, okay? And this to me says everything. How much do the state poll averages miss by, all right? The average error since 1972 in the close races in those battleground states we've been looking at, 3.4 points. 3.4 points. Every single state, all 7 of those key battleground states are within 3.4 points. What's the chance for an even larger error? You know, we talk about the margin of error, right? So what is that 95% confidence interval? What is that true margin of error? 5% of errors in state polling averages are off by more than 9.4 points. These battleground states are well within that. I want you to remember this number because the bottom line is this race is going to be too close to call almost certainly all the way to Election Day. It's definitely going to be within this interval, and it's most likely going to be within this interval. So the bottom line is the state polling averages tell us what it tells us is it's just a race that is too close to call. Maybe one candidate has a slight advantage over the other one, but the bottom line is it is way too close to call, and it will remain so.
Superimpose all of this really important information that you just gave us on the electoral map.
Yeah, okay. So let's say the polls are exactly right. If the polls are exactly right, Kamala Harris gets 276 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 262 because she carries those Great Lake battleground states despite losing North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona. But let's say we have a polling miss like we had in 2020. What happens then? Well, then Donald Trump wins the election in a blowout with 312 electoral votes because he carries all these Great Lake battleground states, plus Nevada, plus the other states he was leading in, Arizona, North Carolina, and Georgia. But 2020 is just one election. What happens if we have a polling miss like 2022? Well, in that particular case, now the winner has flipped again. And Kamala Harris wins in a blowout with 319 electoral votes because she retakes those Great Lake battleground states, carries North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona. So the bottom line here is, yes, we have those state polling averages, but the real thing they tell us is that this race is too close to call. We're probably not going to know who's going to win for another month and perhaps another month and change.
It's the Full Employment Act for senior data reporters.
You know what? I will take it. Any employment is good employment, my friend.
Thank you very much. Kate?
All right, joining us right now is the senior spokesperson for the Kamala Harris campaign, Ian Sams. Ian, thank you so much. Let's leave it as this race is still too close to call from what we just heard from my colleagues. I want to talk to you about some of the issues and some of the questions and answers that the vice president is taking and answering in these slew of new interviews that she's doing. In the 60 Minutes interview, the vice president was asked about Ukraine, asked specifically if she would support Ukraine's bid to join NATO. Let me play this for you.
As president, would you support the effort to expand NATO to include Ukraine?
Those are all issues that we will deal with if and when it arrives at that point. Right now, we are supporting Ukraine's ability to defend itself against Russia's unprovoked aggression.
She did not answer the question about Ukraine's NATO membership. Does the vice president support Ukraine's push to join NATO eventually?
Well, look, Kate, and thanks for having me this morning. I think that what the vice president was saying last night is true, which is right now, in this very moment, the most important thing that the United States and the international community can be doing is supporting Ukraine against this invasion from Putin and his war of aggression that has been brutal and slaughtered so many people in Ukraine. And she is committed to doing that. I think that what she was saying last night is that like there will be a time and place for discussions like that. Right now, the most important thing is that the international community rally around Ukraine. CNN just this morning has new reporting on Bob Woodward's book that is coming out that reveals that President Trump, since he left office as a private citizen, has, according to Trump's own aides, had at least 7 one-on-one calls with Vladimir Putin. I don't know what those are about. I don't know if the Trump campaign or President Trump have explained what those are about, but what the vice president said last night rings even truer. Donald Trump's plan with Ukraine and Russia would be for Ukraine to surrender and to let Vladimir Putin take territory that he is trying to steal. That is dangerous.
They very clearly have a different position on how they approach Russia, Ian. There's no question about that. But the former Secretary General of NATO, he has even said that it's a question of when, not if, Ukraine will join the NATO alliance. Does Kamala Harris agree with that?
Well, I'm going to reiterate what the vice president said, which is that there'll be a time for that conversation. Right now, the conversation should be focused on how do we make sure Ukraine has the resources it needs to repel Putin and Russia. It is something that she has led the international community on, meeting with President Zelensky numerous times and rallying our allies. Donald Trump is saying cede territory to Russia. That should scare every American who is thinking about him returning to the Oval Office. But I just want to make this point. When Donald Trump says that we should give territory from Ukraine to Putin, think about what that means. That means that the potential president of the United States is signaling to the world that if you're a dictator like Vladimir Putin and you want to take another country next door, go right ahead. That is not the kind of strength that America needs on the world stage. And it's why the vice president has been so strong in standing up for Ukraine and for the United States in this moment.
When's the right time, if there's a time and place for it, when is the right time for the vice president to make her position known on if Ukraine if she would support Ukraine's joining NATO?
Well, Kate, I think that for people who want to know the position of these two candidates, again, on this campaign for 1 month more before the election on Ukraine and Russia, I think it's a pretty clear distinction of who has Ukraine's back, who is making sure that Putin and his dictatorial reign is repelled when he tries to invade neighboring countries, and that we just cannot afford the risk that Trump would put the United States in by letting dictators like Putin do that.
They very clearly have different positions on Russia and support for Ukraine. There's no question of that. I'm just trying to nail that down a little bit more. Let's move on. Florida is staring down another hurricane. This will be the second major hurricane to hit the state in less than 2 weeks. A White House official has now told CNN that Vice President Harris reached out to Ron DeSantis, the governor, multiple times since Hurricane Helene, and that the Florida governor did not take any of her calls. Responding to the reports of him not taking her calls, she called it political gamesmanship, irresponsible and selfish, which then led to Ron DeSantis. We don't have the soundbite? We don't have the soundbite, which then led to Ron DeSantis saying that she has no place to be involved in any of these talks with regard to Hurricane Helene recovery, that he has been in touch with Joe Biden, and she's basically trying to she's playing political games by trying to insert herself. What do you say to that?
What I would say to that right now is, I think you're right. We saw yesterday that the governor spoke to the president. The vice president has tried to speak to the governor and would look forward to speaking to the governor, because a moment like this is about putting politics aside and making sure that states who were impacted by the devastation, whether it was Hurricane Helene or preparing for Hurricane Milton to come, which does seem very concerning. And the vice president said yesterday she's been briefed on this from FEMA and is encouraging residents in Florida to listen to their local officials, including Governor DeSantis, about what to do on the ground there as this storm threatens. And I think that what she was speaking to more broadly, which I think is very, very important, is in a moment like this, when you have a choice in a presidential election between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, who is actually putting the country first when it comes to preparing for a natural disaster? We know right now, Donald Trump's own former aides said that when he was president of the United States, he would hold up relief to places that he didn't think voted for him. He politicized getting people the help they need in a moment of pain and crisis. Vice President Harris absolutely will never do that. She wants to make sure that people in Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, the states who have been so impacted by Helene, the states who may be devastated by this hurricane that's barreling toward Florida, that they get the help they need and that they have the resources that they need, which is why she and the president have mobilized thousands of federal personnel, 1,000 active duty military, sent millions of liters of water and meals to states who have been impacted by Helene. That's the kind of leadership you need in a moment like this, not Donald Trump, who's lying about disaster relief not getting to places, who's trying to divide Americans who are facing some of their biggest tragedies of their lives. That is what we don't need from a president and a leader in a moment like this.
These storms and their impact should definitely be above politics, that is for sure. Ian Sams, thank you very much for coming on.